Whether you're starting a digital transformation project or trying to have a control system publish and consume data to their message broker, Electric Supply and Equipment, a full-service electrical distributor, has automation products to achieve this objective. My name is Jeremy Oxendine. I am a software information specialist with Electric Supply and Equipment. I want to talk with you about one of the products we sell to allow the reading and writing of data to your control system via an Mqtt message broker. This product is called the IoT Gateway and is developed by Kepware. The Mqtt client configuration within the IoT Gateway provides a way to get data from devices sent through the Mqtt protocol. This driver connects to the Mqtt server and subscribes or publishes to specific topics. I will demonstrate the communications capability with the ControlLogix controller by subscribing and publishing to the Mqtt broker. So without further delay, let's proceed to the demonstration.
Okay, quickly, let's go over how I've got my lab set up. I've got a ControlLogix controller. I've got two tags, one called Test Read Mqtt and the other one called Test Write Mqtt. So these are being looked at from the perspective of the controller. So the Test Read tag is where I'm going to be reading data from Mqtt and bringing it back into the controller, and the Write tag is where I'm going to take data from the controller and send it into Mqtt. So that's the first thing. That's what I have on my controller. I have a couple utilities, and I'll get into these a little bit later, why I'm using them. One of them is called an Mqtt Spy. It's free to download, and then I'm also using a Mqtt client. Now Mqtt actually is an Mqtt broker. I'm not using that broker, however. The broker I'm using is RabbitMQ, and I'm running that inside or has a Docker container. So that's my setup. You really, you don't have to duplicate this setup. Obviously, you don't have to be using this message broker, but that's the way my lab's built. The other thing I'm using to move these messages around is Kepware. Kepware makes it very easy for us to take data and send it from the controllers into the message broker of choice. So the first thing that I have is I've already set up my channel to communicate with my AB controller. My tags obviously are coming through. Again, this is the tags that you see inside my controller. I've got those defined so that we should be able to communicate to them and send data back and forth. So that's how I've got things set up, and from here we will move into our first objective is to take the data from the controller and write it into the message broker. Okay, let's get into setting up Kep server to communicate with the message broker and take data from the controller and send it to that message broker. So once I'm going to be using the IoT Gateway. So once I have that loaded, it's a process, go through the process of configuring it now. So with my IoT Gateway, I just click on Add Agent, and I'm just going to give it the name of my agent is going to be Kepware. You got several types: a REST client, a REST server, or an Mqtt client. We're going to be using the Mqtt client. I'm going to be doing some later videos on the REST client or REST server, but for right now we're going to use the Mqtt client. So click on that, click Next. Now it's going to ask me for the URL. The URL is going to be the IP address of my Mqtt broker, which happens to be 192.168.10.12. That's what it is in my case. It'll be different in yours probably. So whoever set up your message broker, just find out what the IP address is for that. The port, my default port, which Mqtt uses, is 1883. Yours may be different. Again, check with whoever set up your message broker and they'll be able to tell you that. On the topic, there's plenty of videos written out there or just been developed around Mqtt and how topics and routing keys work. I'm not going to get into that for this. I'm just mainly concentrating on how to configure Mqtt to communicate with a message broker. I'm making the assumption that you understand what those are. I will say that for our case, we've got an exchange topic set up to be Mqtt. That is our topic in our exchange. And the queues that we have defined are this read MQ and write MQ. And those are the two we're going to be using. And remember what I said earlier, the way these are named are in relation to the controller. So when the queue we're going to be sending data to will be the write MQ, and the data that we will read information from will be the read MQ. Now, there's something called a routing key, and again, making an assumption you know what all these mean and how they work. First queue we're going to be trying to communicate with is the write MQ, because we're going to be writing data into that queue. There's a routing key associated with that queue called to_write MQ. So when you build these topics, you start off with a /MQTT, which is the topic, and then define a routing key. So my routing key, for example, in this case is to_write_MQ. So that's my topic, routing key together make up the entire topic. So that's how the IoT gateway using the MQTT client is going to be able to get the information into that queue. So you can do wide or narrow. I'm just going to do the narrow format. I'm going to change this. No, I'm going to leave it like it is. So I'm going to leave everything else default, and then I'm going to do next. And client name, again, this is part of the MQTT protocol. You can change this or make it whatever you want. In my case, I'm just going to use Kepware, and I'm going to use write. Okay. I'm just going to do like camel case on that, right? Okay. So my username password in my case is guest. So yours will be different. Again, whoever set up your message broker, you'll have to have that username and password to be able to get past the security of the message broker. And I'm going to do finish. So at this point, I have halfway completed the configuration. Now what I've got to tell it, this IoT gateway, is I've given it credentials. How do I want to talk? What routing, what topic I'm going to be communicating with, what queue I'm trying to get this information into. My next step is to go through the process and actually add the tag. What tag is it that I'm going to be sending to the queue? So I'm going to add an IoT item. And as I said earlier, this is actually being pulled out of the connectivity underneath Kepware. In this case, I'm going to be coming from an ABB or an AB controller, demo, and then ES&E, and then I'm going to go from this test write MQ. So that's the tag that I want to write into that queue. So I'm going to do that. Scan rate, I'm going to leave it at a second, but I'm only going to write the data whenever it changes. So I'm going to say OK there. Now, we are pretty much done with the configuration of this, and if you notice, a couple of things happening over here on the MQTT console through the Docker. It's telling me that it's accepted an MQTT connection essentially from Kepware. So the connection's been established. Now the next thing I'm going to want to do is I'm going to use one of my utilities, and I'm going to open it up, and this is that Mqtt Spy, which I can just monitor data coming in. So another way I can look at it, I'm just going to open up this connection to the MQTT server and click on that. And there's videos on how to use this also. This is just one of the tools that I use. I'm going to say new, and again, that whole message, the topic configuration that you have to put in, I put in on Kepware. I've got to put it in for this utility too, so it'll know which queue to monitor. So I'm going to say MQTT, and I'm going to use the same one we used a few minutes ago. because I want to go to the same queue, and I'm going to subscribe to that. And I've got a subscription now to that queue, and I'm sitting there monitoring. Anything comes into that queue, I'm going to be able to see it through this utility. So now I'm going to go and I'm going to change that value. Remember, I had it set on change. So if I change that to 98, okay, I should be able to come back here, and within a few seconds this should update if I have configured everything correctly, and I did, and you can see the message that actually ended up in the queue. So that message originated, the data value changed in the controller, kept where through this IoT gateway configuration, was looking at that tag, and on the change of that tag it writes it into the message broker, and that's what you're seeing there. Another utility you could use, as I said earlier, is this Mqtt client tools, and on occasion I'll use those too. So it's kind of the same thing. Mqtt_sub is an executable that says you're going to subscribe to that queue, point it to the IP address, and then the topic that you're going to use. And I need to change my topic here because of the queue. Again, the queue I'm trying to go to, and I click there. Actually, I forgot to put the -D. There we go. So now that's another way I can just monitor the queue. Again, these are external utilities, but they come in pretty handy on this, being able to look at things and see what's happening with your queue. So again, I've changed that data value inside the controller. I should see an update here. Short period of time you saw it on this utility, and now you're seeing it on this utility. So that's how you set up Kepware to write data into a queue. And then once it's in the message broker, obviously you would have something on the other end of the message broker grabbing that information and utilizing it in some of your other systems. So that's that part. And next we'll get into how to take the data from the queue and bring it back down to the controller. Okay, so now let's talk about how we would get data from the message broker and send it down to the controller. So again, first of all we got to go back into the IoT gateway. If we go to the one that's already been configured, now it's going to right click, do properties. You notice down here there's this subscription area. So underneath the subscription area it says listen for write request. So they're looking at it, they're saying write, and the perspective that they're looking at it from is writing to the controller. Okay, so they're looking at it from the perspective of the message broker, where my naming and terminology with all my tags was from the perspective of the PLC. So don't let that confuse you. I just did that backwards from the way that they Kepware is looking at it from. So first of all, we want, yes, we're going to subscribe, and then it's what topic do you want to subscribe to. And again, if you remember our message broker configuration, we're going to be reading from the perspective of the controller. We're going to be reading the data out and sending it or pulling it down to the controller. So the queue is going to be, or the topic's going to be /Mqtt, and the routing key, because I'm going to be pulling from this read MQ queue, is going to be to read_MQ. So to_read_MQ. So apply. Now that part of it is configured. Okay, but again, what tag am I going to write this data into? So I'm going to add another item because I want to use a different tag, and I'm going to use the test read_MQTT, and that's the tag in my controller. So I'm going to say that tag, and I'm going to say OK. So now that tag is going to be the one to receive the data from the message broker when it changes inside the message broker. So we're subscribing to the message broker. So that's pretty much it from the Kepware side. Now we need to simulate a value being written into the message broker so that we can then pick it up and send it to the controller. And again, to do that, I'm going to use this utility, and I've already connected. So again, I got to define the topic, and my topic's going to be Mqtt /to_read_mq. Now you got to make sure that this topic is the same as the one that we define, at least in my scenario, the way I've got things configured. That topic has to be the same topic as the topic that we're subscribing to, because to ensure that we're getting it out of the right queue. So do that. Now this is where it gets a little bit cryptic on how this string has got to be put together. So it's just a format that Kepware is expecting to see, to know how to route that message, if you will, into the controller. So just bear with me on what this looks like, and I'll tell you the parts that are fixed and the parts that you have some change in. So if I click, first of all, you want a bracket, then you want the curly bracket, then you want quotation marks, ID, close quotation marks, colon, then we want quotation marks. Now we need the name of the tag, and we need the name of the tag the way Kepware names it. Okay, so if I go in on that tag I'm trying to write to, and I right click and I do properties, there's what I need. So at this point I can just do a Control C, cancel back out of this, and I'm just going to paste this back into here. Okay, so that's the tag. That's the part that you can vary for this test purpose, or if you have a device that's something that's writing into the queue, this is the way that message has to end up in the queue for Kepware to be able to send it to the controller, or be able to subscribe to it and put it in the controller correctly. So close quotation marks, comma, again, quotation mark, V, quotation mark, colon, space, and then the value you want to write down. Let's write 23 down. Okay, now we curly bracket, bracket. That's pretty much it. So that's going to write the value of 23, value 23 into that tag. So if we hit publish here, that 23 should have gotten written. Sure enough, test MQ. So let's try another one. So you see the value 23 right there, right? So let's go and make it another value. Let's make it, I don't know, 1, 2 or 3. Make it 2 or 3. Publish, 2 or 3. So you can see now, and what this Mqtt Spy is actually doing is writing information into the queue. Kepware is configured to subscribe to that queue, and when it feeds data in that queue, because it's subscribing to it, and that's what a message broker is, sends message in, it brokers the messages between two different applications. So Kepware sees that in the queue, and it pulls it down and sends it to that tag. And how does it know what tag to send it to? Because of the message. The message that was placed in the queue by the application that we simulated tells it what tag to write it into. Okay, does that make sense? So hopefully that does. I know that's kind of hard, difficult maybe to understand it first go around, but it helps a lot if you understand more about, the more you understand about message brokers and Mqtt, the easier this is to follow. But that's how you can use Kepware to do that. Now, with that being said, you saw how easy the Kepware part was. Okay, very simple, very straightforward on configuration. You will spend more time getting, quite honestly, setting up your message broker, passwords, getting ports open, all that kind of stuff, than you will setting up the Kepware piece. The Kepware piece is the easy part. message brokers and configuring those and all the communication stuff that has to take place with firewalls and ports being open, that's a little bit more complex. But the assumption in this demonstration being is that the message broker's up, it's functioning, and then all we got to do is attach Kepware to it, either as a publisher or a subscriber. So the first part, when we did the write, we published to the queue, and the second part, when we read, we were subscribing to a queue. So that's how it is. That's how you set it up. And I think that's one other thing I could show you real quick is, let's say if you was wanting to do some testing and you didn't have this Mqtt Spy and you wanted to use the Mosquito pub client instead of this, you could do that. There's a subscription executable or a public executable. So publish, there's where I'm publishing. The message broker that I'm going to publish to, and then the message that I'm going to send. Now this is a little trickier because of the way command prompts work, but it's the same message that I'm going to publish again. Oh, I had that. Give me a minute. These things aren't that easy to... There we go. So in this case, you've got to use a lot of backslashes because of the quotation marks. So everywhere you see a quotation mark, you need to have a backslash in front of it. Otherwise, it doesn't handle the quotation marks correctly. So there we go. So that should work if I wanted to see this, if I wanted to use this instead of the Mqtt Spy, which Mqtt Spy and Mosquito has nothing to do with Kepware. It's just utilities I'm using for testing, but I figured I'd show you how you could use this to do the same thing. Looks like I may actually have yeah, I've got an error problem in this string. Give me just a second, see if I can't figure out what this is. Didn't have quotation marks around this whole entire message. So the first set of quotation marks you can use. You don't have to have that forwards or backslash in because of the way command prompts work. After that, you have to have that backslash in because it tells it to take those quotation marks, literally has quotation marks and not has closing quotation marks. So at least that's the explanation I've always heard. So anyway, once I do this, I put those quotation marks at the front and the end. I can now go in and you see the value changing here. I'm at 67. Slide this down 60. So 67. Let's change it to like 80, for example. See, it changed 80. So again, just a different utility for routing those messages in.
Thank you for your time today. I hope you have found this video demonstration on communications with the control system using the Mqtt message broker helpful. If you have further questions or need additional assistance, please do not hesitate to contact an electric supply and equipment representative.